Today we're going to talk about Unit 5, Lesson 2, the moon phases and eclipses. Your standards are 6.2.1. If you would like to pause that and look at it again, you may. Engage your brain. Let's start with numbers 1 through 3 on page 255. Pause the video, come back to it when those are done, please. Round and round they go. How are Earth, the moon, and the sun related in space? Earth spins on its axis and orbits around the sun. Any body, we've talked about this in class before, any body that orbits a larger body in space is called a satellite. Smaller bodies that travel around planets are natural satellites and are called moons. How are Earth, the moon, and the sun related in space? Gravity is the force that pulls all bodies that have mass toward other objects. We've talked about this since the beginning of the year. Earth's gravitational pull on the moon keeps the moon in orbit, forming the Earth-Moon system. The distance between Earth and the moon is roughly 383,000 kilometers, or 238,000 miles. What does the moon look like from Earth? Well, the moon is only visible from Earth when it reflects sunlight, and only one side of the moon, often called the near side, faces the Earth. The far side we don't ever see. The moon rotates once on its axis for every 28.5 days it takes to revolve around Earth. So it makes the same turn. Our rotation is like 24 hours for Earth. For moon, a rotation is 28.5 days. And that's about as long as it takes to go around the Earth. What does the moon look like from Earth? If you would please pause the video and do number 6, draw the correct position of the pin where the moon is when the position shown is in the right corner of this figure. So this one, fill in this picture, which side is facing, and then we're going to start class tomorrow with 2 videos. This video and the video at the end of this video notes. So please remind me to do that before we do our discussion of our visa. Why do you always see the same side of the moon? The moon's rotation, the time it takes for it to go around one time, to turn one time, just like Earth does in 24 hours in one day, is about the same as it takes for it to rotate, to revolve around the Earth. So the same side is essentially facing the Earth at all times, and that's what this video will point out to you. If you're a little confused about that, write that question down in your visa so we can talk about it further tomorrow. It's just a phase. How does the appearance of the moon change? As the moon revolves around Earth, the portion of the moon that reflects sunlight back to Earth also changes. This is called a lunar phase or a moon phase. The lunar phases are changes in the moon's appearance because of its position in orbit around the Earth. I want you to stop and do number 8. Active reading. Describe why does the moon's appearance change? That's on page 258. How does the appearance of the moon change? Lunar phases cycle monthly and begin with a new moon phase. The new moon is hard to see because the Earth, the moon, and the sun are all lined up, making the side facing Earth unlit. So the moon is still there, just that no sun is shining on it to reflect back to us to see. As the moon moves in its orbit, as it goes around the Earth, a crescent shape will grow larger as the moon waxes or grows until half of the near side is sunlit. This is a first quarter moon. When the moon is waxing, I remember waxing as when you wax a car, you're getting it brighter and shinier towards a new moon. Towards a full moon, sorry. The gibbous phase is when the near side is more than half lit. So anything that's past half of the part of the moon that we see lit is called gibbous. So more than half is gibbous. When the moon is fully lit, we call it a full moon. So it's going to wax. It's going to be a waxing crescent, a first quarter, a waxing gibbous, until we get to a full moon. From there, the lit portion of the moon will shrink, or it's called waning, during the 3rd week of the cycle. So you can remember waning as if you think of a baby, if you have younger brothers and sisters, or if you have farm animals that you're trying to get away from their mother off a bottle, that's called weaning. So they get less and less of the bottle until they don't need it anymore. So the same can be remembered through waning. It shrinks. There's less and less light that's visible on the moon until it gets to a new moon. When the near side is only half lit in sunlight, it's called a 3/4. It's 3/4 the way through the cycle, so we call it a 3rd quarter moon. Remember, it looks like half is lit up, but there's a half, an actual half of the moon that you don't even see. That's the far side of the moon. So really only a quarter of the moon is lit up when it looks like half from Earth. So that's why we call it a 3rd quarter. When the moon is seen as a waning crescent shape, the cycle is almost complete. When the moon is unlit, it's called a new moon, and the cycle is complete. Do page 259, number 10, visualize it. Analyze what shape does the moon appear to be when it's closer to the sun than Earth is. How do the lunar eclipses occur? Exploring eclipses. An eclipse is an event during which one object in space casts a shadow on another object. A lunar eclipse occurs when the moon moves through the Earth's shadow. So, the way I remember a lunar eclipse is I say the moon is a mess. So you have the moon, M-E-S. This is the sun over here. We have moon, Earth, sun, and a line. The moon is a mess. That's a lunar eclipse. The umbra is the darkest part of the shadow. So it's this portion here. You see it's darker. And the penumbra is the lighter part of the shadow. Okay, so it's not getting as much of the eclipse, but it's still experiencing that eclipse. Before a lunar eclipse, the moon is a full moon. The moon moves into the penumbra shadow and becomes less bright. When the moon moves into the umbra, remember that dark part of the shadow, the moon is in total darkness. And a total lunar eclipse occurs when the moon moves completely inside the umbra. I think we had a lunar eclipse already this year that we got to visualize. And there may be another one coming in April. We could look that up. If the moon misses all or part of the umbra and part of it stays lit, we call it a partial lunar eclipse. You do not see lunar eclipses each month because the moon's orbit is tilted slightly. It's about 5% relative to the Earth's orbit. So, we see a new moon when the moon, Earth, and sun are lined up so that it's blocking out the sunlight on the near side of the face of the moon. However, we don't see a lunar eclipse every time we have a new moon or a full moon because of that 5% difference, that tilt of the moon. Go to page 260 and do number 11. You're going to fill in the boxes with the type of the eclipse that would occur if the moon were in these areas. Is it a full lunar eclipse if it's in this area or this area? Is it a partial lunar eclipse if it's in this area or this area? How do solar eclipses occur? So when the moon is directly between the sun and the Earth, the shadow of the moon falls on part of the Earth and causes a solar eclipse. So if the moon is a mess, M-E-S, moon, Earth, sun, that lineup, that's a lunar eclipse. The way I remember a solar eclipse is EMS. It's when the Earth, the moon, and the sun are lined up in that order, with the moon in the middle. That is a solar eclipse. When the sun's light is completely blocked by the moon, it's called a total solar eclipse. Outside the umbra, but within the penumbra, people see a partial solar eclipse. It's a lot harder, it's a lot more rare to see a solar eclipse because, as you'll see, the umbra is much smaller, and the penumbra. The moon's umbra makes a shadow that is never more than a few hundred kilometers across. A total eclipse covers only a part of the Earth and can only be seen in certain particular areas. A total solar eclipse happens somewhere on Earth every 1 to 2 years. But again, that's the place where it's happening is a very small area, a few hundred kilometers across. Whereas with a lunar eclipse, an entire side of the Earth can see at least part of it. Okay, so here is your lineup. EMS, Earth, Moon, Sun. This is your solar eclipse. So what happens is the sun is shining this way and part of the moon is going to block out this part of the sun. And if you look here, this is the penumbra. I'm sorry, the umbra is this dark one. And if you follow all the way back, only a tiny, tiny portion right there, we'll see the full solar eclipse. This part in the penumbra, anything in this lighter shadow here to here, we'll see a partial solar eclipse. So a very small area will get to participate. Go ahead and do visualize it, numbers 12 and 13 on page 261. All right, and then this will be the other movie that we're going to start with on the moon when we come to class tomorrow. So remind me, we'll start with the first one on the moon's why we don't see the far side of the moon, I guess. And then we'll also watch this little thing on the moon. And please remember to fill out your visa. You need to write a question. Even if you didn't have a question over what we did today, you need to write a test question with an answer and get a signature from your parents.